Hey, what's going on, you guys? So welcome back to the channel. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the channel. If you're watching on YouTube, smash the like button, hit the bell notification button so you're always notified any new content the channel puts out. Join us over on Patreon or become a member of the channel to help support the channel as well. So I really, really do appreciate everyone who's on Patreon and who is a member of the channel. And also follow us on Spotify and on YouTube podcasts. In fact, the show will be up on Spotify after the conclusion of this stream, and will be up instantly, obviously, at the same time on YouTube podcast. So without further ado, let's invite our guests for the evening. Is none other than Tom and Ty of Total Disclosure Podcast. And here they are. What's going on, you guys?
What's happening, man? Thanks for having us here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Had a ring to it too. Ty and Tom from Total Disclosure. It's like,
I know.
It had like a thing. Dude, your intro was so good, by the way.
Oh,
I was just feeling that, man. I was really liking that.
I made that recently, but you know what else I made recently was for dinner. I recreated the double-decker taco from Taco Bell. It was really good because they canceled that shit and I couldn't believe it. When they took it off the menu, I was like, dude, are you fucking kidding me? And so my wife bought these Taco Bell like hard shell tacos, and so I just like recreated it myself, and it was amazing. Very nostalgic as well.
Yeah.
So guys, let me ask you, we just had the UFO hearings. And I know on Total Disclosure Podcast, which if you guys haven't followed them yet, go to Total Disclosure Podcast on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and also check them out on Spotify as well.
Yeah, mainly on Spotify.
On Spotify.
Spotify or Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, our podcasts don't get uploaded to YouTube unless you're a member. That's just something that we do. We keep our YouTube separate. Tom is now running a show on YouTube for us called Total News Update, where we kind of do like 30-minute clips, segments, more news straight to the, for the audience who doesn't have time to sit through a 2-hour podcast. Tom does very well with that. But I talked to you about this backstage. I did this on Film Junkie, and again, I wanted to make some opening remarks here because the last time I spoke to you was before the hearings, and we were speculating whether they would happen and whether they wouldn't. They have now happened, and things have not just heated up, but today we sit before you with a revelation that will change the very fabric of our understanding of the universe. I came and I come not as a conveyor of conspiracy or speculation, but as a person, and I can speak for Tom, persons who have been convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that there is and inlays an extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence, that remains to be seen. So for decades, we've gazed upon the stars, marveling at their beauty and mystery. Our imaginations have taken us on journeys to distant planets and distant civilizations. But little did we know these visions might be closer to reality than we could have ever dared to believe. The evidence is overwhelming. Reports of UFOs, unexplained phenomena witnessed by trained pilots and civilians alike. The ancient artifacts and texts that speak of celestial visitors. All of these pieces have gradually formed a mosaic that reveals an astonishing truth. Alien civilizations are real, and they have been observing us and may have intervened to a degree not unlike the Eternals, considering that may reckon with this audience. Let us not mistake their presence as a malevolent force, yet we do have to, we haven't steered ourselves into annihilation yet. While it is true that we cannot fully comprehend their narratives, their motives, and we need to always protect ourselves first and foremost as a species of Earth, not of each country made up of lines on a map, of Earth, of Earth. It is my belief that they are watching over us, monitoring our development, and perhaps waiting for the right moment to make contact. There is most certainly more than one species, as we may find out soon, but I don't know if that's probably for another day. Imagine the knowledge that these beings might possess, the discoveries they may have made, and the insights they could share with us. Who were their Einsteins, their Teslas, their Stephen Hawkings? The advancements could be overnight. This encounter could catapult humanity into an era of unprecedented progress, healing our planet, curing disease, and unlocking the mysteries of the universe. What lie ahead of us can be scary. However, the unknown always is. We do not do these things because they are easy. We do them because they are hard, as the late JFK would say. Thank you very much. So,
Very well said.
Very well said.
What we want to get across tonight is that if you didn't watch these hearings, you need to, because these three men, Tom, I mean, these three men are of the utmost credibility,
The
right?
highest.
The highest, and if we are doing ourselves as a species a disservice by not taking what they're saying seriously. And the mainstream media has had a huge part to play in this. They will not run the story. Why? This is the biggest. I mean, Trump was in office for what? 4 years? They ran a story.
Yeah.
They ran a story on him every single day.
Of course.
If not multiple.
Still doing it.
Yeah, if not multiple. Now, I'm not here to tell you to side with the Republicans or that Trump's right, that Trump's wrong.
No.
I'm here just to say mainstream media covered Trump every single day. But here we have these three people who have come directly from the military-industrial complex. They're basically confirming what we've suspected and learned through leaks and other such ways over the past. They're validating what we've all said for years, and all of a sudden, now we turn our back on them? Well,
Makes no sense.
It makes no sense.
Zero.
So you got to ask yourself, who runs the country?
Right. I mean, these guys are under oath making these testimonials. And, one of the senators, I forgot what his name was, or congressman, he said, I find it hard to believe that these species flew billions of miles to get here, and then their craft simply crash.
Yeah.
I thought that was the stupidest comment of the entire thing. I was like, you got to be kidding me, dude. You're telling me, like, you don't believe that a craft could travel here and then all of a sudden be struck by lightning or be shot down by something else? Or
that's a great point, man. Because Roswell, a lot of people believe that crash it occurred because of lightning.
Yeah.
Like, it's been talked about. And plus, who says they're coming from another planet? Like, Ty will even tell you, like, we think outside of the box all the time. I don't even think they're coming from other planets anymore. I think it's much more complex than that. They could be coming from deep down in the oceans, but I actually think they're coming from other dimensions, like parallel realities. And I know it's a little wacky to some people.
No, it's not.
No, it's not really.
It shouldn't be, though, right? No, I agree. The math and the science back up those ideas now.
I mean, when you consider the idea that instead of traveling, light years to get here, now there could be other ways that they're traveling that's making it a lot faster. But if you're talking about interdimensional travel, where they're not having to go a distance or having to literally step through and come into our
it's still
dimension.
remarkable technology, regardless.
Absolutely, but what I'm saying is that it almost seems more feasible that you can travel interdimensionally as opposed to light years to get to a different location.
Absolutely, it makes sense. Like, if they're that advanced, why would they be doing almost anything the way that we would think of? Like, the first thing we think of is, oh, how do we get this rocket to go faster? Whereas they're thinking, well, how can we take point A and bend it to point B?
Right.
You know, they're way beyond it. Like, if you've ever seen Contact with Jodie Foster, you have to think like a vegan, and they take the primer for that ship, that the machine that they wanted to build, and they warp the page so you're looking at things, you know, from multiple dimensions as opposed to a flat piece of paper. You have to go outside the box.
And when we do go outside the box, all of a sudden we start having these correlations. Now, let's say for 1 second that, and David Grush even mentions it in his News Nation interview, that these beings may come from a different dimension. Right now, when we think outside the box, we detonate a nuclear weapon. If they occupy the same space as we do, but just in a different set of the multiverse, now we know, right? We know as a pop culture fan base and audience, in some cases, that, you know, when you do these things at the atomic level, they have consequences that are not just on the surface level, right? There's ramifications that happen through space and time, right? So what if we're doing more damage there than we're doing here? And they're here to monitor us and say, hey, guys, chill the out, you know? Like, you're you're killing millions of people that you have no idea exist.
You're
right?
damaging, like, parts of reality that you don't understand. Also, just to put it out there, since you're talking about this, today is the anniversary of the bombings of Hiroshima.
Yes,
I put out a really, really long post about that today on Twitter. The older I get, the more I feel affected by that. But that ties into what we're talking about, because there was a massive uptick in sightings right after the Trinity detonation, the very first atomic bomb that was detonated, at least in the modern age.
Which we did, which Tom and I did a video explaining the Trinity event. So anyone who wants to watch or more information on that Trinity event, aside from what it's about to tell you, definitely check it out on our, because we go through the whole thing. So
definitely, it was an interesting project, and it's amazing when you couple that with these accounts of UFOs interacting with, interfering with, and even shutting down nuclear missile sites from individuals in the military, again, with high levels of credibility. They have no reason to come out and just fabricate these stories. They're not getting anything out of it. You know, why would they at that point?
I mean, to come out and make these statements, and let's speculate the fact that, okay, let's say, you know, Commander Fravor is making this up. Why on earth would he come out, make this shit up, and destroy his own reputation? It makes zero sense.
I'm
and
glad you said it that way.
Well, he, you know, maybe he's trying to make some money off it. I highly doubt that. This guy is a Top Gun graduate. He was the leader of the Black Aces Squadron, and he's going to come out and make these crazy claims that other pilots and that other crewmen experienced as well. That makes zero sense.
There were 4 to 6 people who saw the Tic Tac. Now we know Alex Dietrich, who actually I did just talk to about appearing on the show. So hopefully that'll be happening. Alex Dietrich, who she was flying the plane that held high while Fravor dove in, and she had her Wizzo in the back, because these are these were F-18 Fs. Yeah, so those are the ones that have they're 2-seaters basically.
Right.
So there's 2 versions of the craft. One is a 1-seater. There's another that is a 2-seater. So these 2-seaters allow you to have a second person who is monitoring radar, monitoring basically, you know, the field of battle. Now, so 4 people confirmed seeing the Tic Tac. Now the Tic Tac is this encounter with the Nimitz is a focal point in the UFO hearings, because that's what Fravor saw. That's the experience they had. But couple that with what Ryan Graves and them were seeing off the East Coast, right? Couple that with what David Grush is telling you. It's all pointing towards one thing, that there is a non-human intelligence that is in, and while we speak, on probably flying through our airspace right now.
Yeah, they're there.
Literally right now.
Well, and that was the thing that surprised me the most, with Graves talking about how, on the East Coast, on the Atlantic seaboard, that there are these spheres, kind of like in Tom's background, these spheres that are surrounded by a cube, a translucent cube, and they're just flying around doing God knows what, and they've been doing it for years.
Well, again, I go back to that aspect. I think that the craft that both pilots saw, or both squadrons saw, because remember, Ryan Graves was not just seeing these off the coast of the East Coast. He was seeing this while deployed. So these things followed them from the East Coast of the United States, off the coast of the Carolinas, all the way into the peninsula, and into the seas of the Middle East. So this thing was they were observing. These things are observing us. They're watching us, and I sometimes they have to show force, and that force comes in the form of shutting down nuclear missiles and turning them back on, and saying, "Hey, slow it down."
Yeah.
Slow it down. Pump the brakes.
Well, but also too, I mean, when you look at
go ahead. So Tom's going to talk about the bill from Chuck Schumer that's been introduced, and he's going to tell us all about why that is going to shed so much light on the cases, if passed, the cases of the United States. We will then find out how many cases in all the UFO files will be declassified. To a degree, as long as they don't jeopardize national security, which of course there's a fine line. But Tom, if you could explain that bill and why it's so important.
So, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, what he did is he introduced legislation, and it's to create a review board, which would be dedicated to the disclosure of unidentified anomalous phenomenon, materials, information, data, etc.
Much like the Iran-Contra
right, exactly.
Group. Yes.
Now, everyone that's watching and listening right now, I want you to really picture what I'm about to say, and you tell me what this sounds like to you. The board comprises, or will comprise, really, 9 U.S. citizens, nominated specifically by the president, and they will have the authority to assess and advise on the release of this UAP/UFO information, including potential biological evidence, which would indicate non-human intelligence and their craft, etc. The review board would operate independently and have the power of eminent domain to obtain materials from aerospace companies if necessary, because they're private companies. They're exempt from FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests. Now, on this review board, they're going to be pulling in individuals from multiple disciplines, from science to philosophy, etc. I mean, this sounds exactly like what you would put together if you're about to reveal this information to the public, does it not? I mean, that's exactly what it sounds like. If this passes, there will essentially be an official board with the sole purpose of disclosure. I mean, it's pretty plain to see. It's in plain English, and it's also, I believe, the official name is the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023. I mean, it's right there in print. You can't get around it. You can't sugarcoat it. It is exactly as they say it is. And it also defines non-human intelligence as being any sentient, intelligent, non-human life form that's related to UAP, but that also includes technologies of unknown origin, materials, and technology that without prosaic explanation or known human manufacture. So it covers all bases essentially, and this is real legislation. And sadly, there's a lot of mainstream media outlets that have taken this and have tried to paint it as being some sort of wacky distraction from, X, Y, and Z. But I don't think they realize how much movement is happening right now. This is not black and white at all. It's very complex. There's a lot of high level witnesses, a lot of credible individuals, and there's more coming. David Grush is the first of many. Fravor and Ryan Graves as well, but we're about to this is the next step, and I think Ty will agree with me here because we've spoken about this before, and there's people that we talk to that we have some connections with that are hearing what I'm about to say. The next round of witnesses, or the next witness, singular, depending on how that goes, is not going to be a David Grush where a lot of the information is secondhand. It's going to be someone who has likely had firsthand experience with these technologies or biological samples, we'll call them, and has potentially even laid their hands on this particular technology. It's people that were in the room.
Right.
So to speak.
And when it comes to David Grush, and something that we talked about backstage, he was unable to fully disclose all the information that he knew. And I saw a lot of people out there saying, oh, this guy's full of crap. He wouldn't tell the truth. He kept saying in private. So that means that he's probably lying. But there's a reason why he was doing that, right?
You know what that's funny? It's the exact opposite.
Exact opposite.
Exactly.
Exact opposite.
Why don't you lay that out?
Yeah, Ty, tell us about why he couldn't fully disclose everything, because I hate when people use that to smear the guy.
It's
not right.
It's the exact opposite. It only shows you that he is so it only reinforces what we've known to be David Grush the whole time. Now, David Grush being a whistleblower, again, we'll circle back to the idea that no one wants to be a whistleblower. David Grush, his reputation inside the government, inside the NGO, the NRO, these prestigious agencies, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, you don't just get these positions because you're sloppy, right? This guy is as smart as anybody that you've probably never met someone as smart as David Grush. Now,
yeah, maybe not. That's a good point.
His reputation inside the government is that he is an exemplary patriot. He is maybe sometimes a stickler and by the book. So he does have autism. He's on the spectrum, and people are using that against him too. It's absolutely insanity. This guy is only talked about in a positive light. And when he says, I will only talk about that in a private skiff, it's because he's so credible. It's because he won't cross the line and put the national security of the United States on the line. It's because he is who he says he is.
The smear campaign against multiple individuals has hit new lows. Ty, I don't know if you saw this today, but we'll go over this real quick. There's a journalist, if we want to call him that. I'm actually not going to say his name, but he made the connection, and I guess, had some things to say about it, that David Grush works for Gary Nolan and Chris Mellon through the Soul Foundation. And just to quote this article, I mean, it's like a paragraph. This individual who wrote this.
Is it Mean Street?
No, it's not. Even less known. The Soul Foundation is headquartered in Huntsville, Alabama, the aerospace industry hub where Space Command was supposed to move until President Biden canceled the plans this week alongside Radiance Technologies, the defense contractor, secret of Skinwalker Ranch star Travis Taylor, who thinks he's infected with a disembodied alien parasite, and former UAPTF head Jay Stratton, the werewolf-haunted Skinwalker portal believer, quietly work for. It supposedly produces advisory and public work for the U.S. government. Chris Mellon is listed as one of the company's directors. And then he also says of Gary Nolan, refers to Gary Nolan as the UFO investigating Stanford professor who's afraid of open windows because of a childhood alien abduction attempt. And then says, this certainly isn't suspicious at all. So real quick, I'll just say this. I responded and said, obviously, that's disheartening to see people speak this way about people with their credentials that are really trying to, push the conversation forward and get the truth out to the public. And I thought this was, reminiscent of high school gossip, using trivial insults as a means to provoke a reaction from the reader.
Right.
They didn't provide any straightforward information. They were, it's all ad hominem attacks against the individuals. They're all guilty and being labeled as suspicious based solely on association while lacking any concrete specifics regarding that, what the suspicion even entails. It doesn't even say that. Evidently, the author is resorting to emotional manipulation through insults rather than providing a foundation of logical evidence. And also, just to skip to the end of it, to offer a minor correction to this individual's article, it was actually Space Command, not Space Force, that had plans to relocate to Huntsville. To clarify, Space Force is the military branch that was recently established during the Trump administration. Space Command is a military organization encompassing members from various branches. So he couldn't even get that right. So it's like, you know what? I can't take this seriously. But this is the stuff that people are going online, and this is like what the Google algorithm throws in front of them, and then they turn away. They don't even look any further, and that's what really upsets me.
It's concerning. It is absolutely concerning that the mainstream media covered the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial far more than they did these UFO hearings. Let that settle in.
Mm-hmm.
Let that really settle in. It's astonishing. That is fucking horseshit.
It is. And the really fact that you have content creators and people in general just on social media that they gravitate towards negativity because it's easier to critique and criticize things than it is to actually speak the truth and to discover what the truth really is. And so that is the sad part. I mean, when you're reading that article, not even halfway through, you're like, either you're turning this guy off, you're like, this guy's a fucking idiot, or you're reading and thinking, oh man, these people are crazy. And so it's either way, it doesn't help either way. It's just, it's absolute garbage.
It's childish is what it is.
It's childish. It really
There's no research behind what this person said about these individuals at all.
At all. And so when I go back to the hearings, I guess like the biggest thing I want to ask you guys is that what did we get out of these hearings? And then you talked about the committee that is hopefully going to be put in place to look into all of these, topics. But what was the biggest thing that we got out of these UFO hearings that made the difference of what we didn't have before them? Ty, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. So the biggest things that we got from this hearing was truly a first step in disclosure. For the first time, we had 3 people involved to some degree with either chasing UFOs, seeing UFOs, and investigating UFOs. Someone from this Pentagon whistleblower. We had all of them with this picturesque moment where they're all sworn in. It almost made me cry a little bit when they're being sworn in. Each one of those guys insisted that they be sworn in that day because they wanted to prove to themselves, not just to our nation, but to themselves, that what they saw and what they did will be a stepping stone towards this process we call disclosure. Now, it is remarkable to me the fact that in these hearings, we were not just told that there are bodies, right? But we're told that there are craft that we have retrieved that are of non-human origin, which David Grush, can give the locations of, and he would happily do so in a skiff. And yeah, it's one of those moments where you're like, fucking A. But he also, one of the biggest things that he gave is he said he would give a list of cooperative and hostile witnesses. People with firsthand knowledge of these programs who are hostile witnesses, people that they would have to subpoena in hearings that happen in September. So these people are like, the ones who are career bureaucrats, right? The ones keeping the secrets. That's who he's talking about. But he also has a list of people that have worked on the program who are cooperative witnesses who will come forward under the right circumstances in a skiff. And again, these clearances have to be, they're trying to follow the rules. The rules are put in place to keep us safe, right? To keep us from being animals. These checks and balances are needed. And yeah, it can be a slow process at times, but look how fast in the last year alone, the UFO topic has heated up. We went from a 2017 New York Times article and still talking about that at the beginning of this year to a whistleblower with reverse engineering UFO technology. We have bodies. They might come from a different dimension. The Vatican is involved to some degree. And they know. And these beings might have a treaty that's been signed with a faction of human beings. Those are the biggest takeaways.
And it got entered into the record. I mean, literally, it was on fucking C-SPAN. So all of those items that there have been intact and partially intact craft that have been recovered, and there has been an effort underway for decades to reverse engineer them and to understand how they operate. We have biological samples that it's not even just tissues and perhaps blood and skin cells, but it's fully intact and partially intact bodies. Like Ty said,
Absolutely.
the Vatican is involved. There are aerospace companies that have these materials in their possession because they are avoiding those Freedom of Information Act requests. Lockheed Martin comes to mind. Northrop Grumman comes to mind.
And there's going to be companies on that list that you would have never expected.
Of course, and probably never even heard of, actually.
Yeah, and most likely there'll be shell corporations. And then I have a feeling that we're going to find out one of these big biotech companies is going to be involved. And it's going to cause a lot of mistrust. And I think, again, the Department of Energy is involved. I think the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency is involved, and I think the DoD is involved.
Big time. Pentagon knows more than they let on as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the thing, is that when you have these companies like Northrop Grumman and these big what do you call them?
Conglomerates.
Yeah, when they're involved, it makes things so much more messier as well, because you're not just dealing with the government, you're dealing with these corporations, companies that don't want to give up this technology, that don't want to give up what they have and what they've been working on as well, because at the end of the day, it's going to make them money. And so to give up and disclose everything they have, now you're going through a whole nother level of trying to get the truth out of now a corporate
or bad at this point.
That's why I say fuck them. But I can see how this could be a problem or a slow process.
But it's
the
also
oil industry upside down too.
Well, it's also a problem that we're giving them this much time. Now, recently, it's been told to me that there is a rush by this military industrial complex establishment, but their negotiations with private aerospace and whoever else is involved, there's a recess right now for the House and Congress. So essentially they've just been given the red flag, right? The red flag's been put up on them, and now they're racing to back engineer, and they're cutting corners that they normally wouldn't, and they're getting ready. They're staging these things to be moved at the drop of a dime. This is what I fear, that we're not that politicians and the people that represent us are not going to kick down the doors fast enough. We're going to allow these people to basically put us through a shell game, and they're going to be able to move these things so that when we do show up, when our representatives do show up, that nothing to see here. Right. So that is a big issue for me. And apparently there's work being done at a certain base that you all know as Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. There's work being done there, and they're being sloppy, and a squadron of men got sick all at the same time. And the military is not doing enough to help them. And this is a direct act, potentially, of reverse engineering. Their symptoms are that of radiation sickness, and we know that Wright-Pat is one of these places where this stuff happens.
Yeah, Area 51 is not where they keep the goods anymore.
No.
That has long been...
Once Bob Lazar once Lazar even mentioned Area 51,
that was it.
A week later, everything was moved out of there.
Now, Ty, I don't know if you know about this too, but there's all of a sudden I had this sent to me by one of my little connections. We'll call him a connection at this point. He sent me some videos today and some articles, and all of a sudden, while this is all going on, there has been this massive leap all of a sudden in like room temperature, superconductors, like all these technologies that have always been rumored to have a link to these reverse engineering programs, and all of a sudden there's just been like this jump in progress out of nowhere, and I'm like, well, isn't that a little odd?
Yeah, and not to mention supercomputing and
quantum and all that,
and quantum and artificial intelligence, and how fast it's moving could be a result of this process. Now, I do have to go to the bathroom, but when I get back, I want to talk about the grooming of the general public and how you yourself have been played by, or not played, but groomed in a sense, to understand that there are other civilizations. You know, we talk about Guardians of the Galaxy, right? That's a prime example. The Avengers, Flash, the multiverse.
So you're saying conditioning, basically.
Basically, a conditioning of the last 15 to 20 years, a conditioning that has been happening right in front of your eyes to allow you, and it might be the result of these time frames we've been given. And I'm gonna go to the bathroom, but I'll leave you on that. And when I get back, we'll discuss it.
That makes a lot of sense too. I'll just say real quick that the first thing that comes to mind there is if you go and watch Doctor Strange, talking about the astral plane and all the the interdimensional aspect of it. It's like that's the first thing that comes to mind, is that there's just been this sudden injection of multiverse into like
Loki.
Everything. Loki, like that's.
By the way, trailer 2 for Loki. Oh my God, so fire!
Oh man, Loki's dope.
But I mean, even what we're talking about what David Grush has revealed. I mean, a lot of it to me, it lends credence to what we heard from Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar talked about the reverse engineering of UFO craft, and that they have this gravitational propulsion system. And so the things that Bob Lazar talked about, to me, it makes so much sense when you hear about everything that we're hearing about now. And so, I mean, I believe that Bob Lazar is telling the truth. I don't see a reason why he would go out of his way to do this. It hasn't really done him much good. but I think that when you look at what he has talked about, and what was it? Element 151 or I forgot the exact.
115.
Yeah, Element 115. He talked
Mhm.
about that back in the 80s.
Yeah, very
And the
much
shit
so.
existed, that they discovered it, and they didn't even have it, they were able to create it for like a microsecond or whatever.
Yeah, pretty much, but they couldn't make us like he's talking
They
about
couldn't make a stable form of
version
it.
of it. They can't. There's an island of stability that exists with isotopes, and we haven't been able to create that yet. But I also thought of this because there's been a lot of people that have tried to debunk that particular claim. I'm like, well, wait a second. We're talking about names of elements, such. What if they just lied to him about where it is on the periodic table? What if it's actually like 122? They didn't necessarily have to tell him the truth about that. So,
Right.
like, he could very well have been interacting with an element that he thought was 115 that had these miraculous, meta properties as I like to call them, and it may not have been 115 at all. Like, but that aside, if it is just 115, the properties between an unstable and a stabilized isotope of that element would be radically different. They have
Right.
not achieved that yet. It has not
But
happened.
he even talked about the fact that there was multiple craft, all different shapes and sizes. David
Yes.
Grush touched on the fact that there was multiple craft under under the government control, that they have these
Giant ones too, like the size of like a football field. So
and-
did you hear about the one that was so big that they built they built like a facility over top of it because they can't move it?
wow, I wonder
Ross
where is this at?
Coulthart was on Project Unity's YouTube channel on his podcast. This guy Jay, I've talked to him before. He's a really, really nice, sweet guy. And Ross said that it's a location outside of the United States, but I believe it is an American company. And what they did is they built some kind of facility over top of a craft that was so large that they were unable to move it. So they figured the best way to hide it was to build over top of it.
Just cover it up and work on the inside. But not even so. Like we talk about that, right? And Bob Lazar talked about how the craft would turn belly up and then poof, we would take off. And then you see on the gimbal video, you see the craft turn on its belly, and then that's where it cuts off. You know what I mean? Which pisses me
Amazing.
off that it cuts off right there because I'm like, dude, it was about to go somewhere,
It's like,
and
come
they said,
on,
okay,
man.
that's enough. You know what I mean?
They have better footage of it.
I'm sure
know
they do. But and the thing too is that like there's so many things that connect to what Bob Lazar was talking about, and so I mean I fully believe Bob Lazar. I think he's telling the truth, and I think he did experience a lot of these things. But having the hearings, having them sworn under oath and talk about this stuff in front of Congress. I mean, we had the technician who was who was for the Air Force, who talked about how he entered that one facility, and the other technician who was there told him about how they discovered a base on the moon. It was showing him pictures and all this stuff about these structures that were on the moon.
Yeah.
And he even said himself,
stuff out
he
there.
said, I will testify in front of Congress about this. And so, and when you go back to that statement of him saying that, and then you see David Grush, you see Commander Fravor, and you see Ryan Graves all there. I mean, this is what he's talking about. This is what he's talking about. And
there's a lot of weird stuff going on, man. I don't know if you heard this either, but the Tic Tac specifically, there's reason to believe, apparently, there's evidence suggesting that there's more than one of these Tic Tacs, and they dock with something underneath the ocean that we are fully aware is there. Like there's like a superstructure in the Atlantic Ocean that these Tic Tac devices are literally docking with. It's like their home base, and then they leave. Like it's like something straight out of The Abyss from James Cameron. It's just like, look, I get it. There's probably some people watching this like, who is this guy with the hat? What the hell is he talking about? Shut up. Please hear me and Ty out. When we're regular guys, just like anybody else, but we have taken the time to look at a lot of the evidence that most people will not take the time to look at, I had an experience as a child. I had a giant triangle hover over my head, only a couple 100 feet above my head. It was unmistakable. This is as real as the sky is blue. It's happening. They're here. I don't know what they are. I'm not saying they're aliens. And I know that sounds weird too, but I don't necessarily know if they're from another planet, another dimension, another universe, another timeline. They could be from the depths of the ocean. I have no idea, but there is something here that is intelligent, that is operating technology that is thousands of years ahead of us, and they've been here for a long time. It's real.
Well, going back to, or I should say, to touch on the interview that Ty had with Linda Moulton Howe, she talked about how there are multiple species of extraterrestrials, which to me that makes a whole lot of sense. And we talk about looking back at scriptures and biblical writings and biblical or old world art, you see all these signs that lend to the extraterrestrials being a part of our history.
100%. Why are there UFOs and paintings from like the Renaissance? Like,
exactly,
doesn't make any sense.
and one of the things that Ty and I had talked about was when it comes to the movie, A Moment of Contact. When you when we talk about this encounter with these extraterrestrials, the sulfur ammonia smell, the red eyes, the horns, for all we know, this is the ancient depiction of what these creatures were, what these extraterrestrials were.
It's like demon equals alien equals angel equal. It's like it's all the same thing with like 50 different names depending on the cultural belief system.
And then when it comes to sulfur, where does sulfur come from? Like whenever you have like those sulfur baths, sulfur water, it's coming from deep underground. And so again, you're looking at, it's easy to make the connection that these are demons that come from the underground. That's why they smell like that. And that's why they have the red eyes, because if people don't know what they're looking at, they're going to go based on anything that they know. And so right away, they're going to say, these are demons. And so I fully believe that's what these things are.
That's why the Romans said they saw flying shields that were flaming flying shields.
Ezekiel's wheel.
Why Ezekiel's wheel. That's why the with the ancient Vimanas, right? All these things.
That one's really on the nose.
Yeah.
Too.
All these things add up to one from my opening remarks, this mosaic of that we've never been alone. The question of are we alone is redundant. We've never been alone. Never. We've always had this presence. It might have it could very well possibly outdate us on this planet, and that would be very hard to come to grips with. But I want to get back. I want to get back to something. So the grooming of the public to accept this non-human intelligence goes back to Independence Day, to UFOs past, present, and future, right? And then and so forth and so on. With Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters, with maybe even Arrival. These films, this idea, I oftentimes wonder, because Steven Spielberg, he enlisted the help of Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was the lead scientist on Project Blue Book. They brought him in. He has a cameo, but they brought him in as a consultant so they could get their stuff right. So they could go through the data and make sure that what they were putting on screen matched up to what was actually being seen in our skies. And there's a reason for that. Now, my thinking is that so many of these people looked at Stan Lee as an idol. What if Stan Lee was being given information by people in the government who loved comic books and wanted him to there's you got to ask yourself, how the fuck did Stan Lee come up with all these characters, right, and all these storylines, right? Well, maybe he had a little help, just like Steven Spielberg had some help with Close Encounters, and like that's not a wild thing to think about, because when I looking for ideas for these comic books and these storylines, the multiverse gets introduced. This long predates the films that we're seeing now. That Kevin Feige may have no idea that what he's including has been integrated into the public via the original comic books. They're just putting it on screen now, and it's doing its job. Yep. Right? It's doing its job. It's allowing the public to grasp the idea that we're not alone in the universe. And when we go out into the universe, i.e., Guardians of the Galaxy, we encounter good and bad, much like we have on our planet. But the universe is teeming with life. Is essentially the moral of all of this. Alien, Prometheus. We can go down the list if you'd like, but there has been a grooming of the public to accept a non-human intelligence for a long time. Now, if you were to ask 100 people 50 years ago if we are alone in the universe, 49 would have said no. Would have said yes, we're alone. One would have said no. Now, if you ask that same question to 50 people, it's the exact opposite. 49 will say yes, there's no chance we're alone. The universe is too big. And one, that religious person will say, no, we're alone. We're God's creation, and yada yada. So are we on a timeline? John Ramirez has talked about it. When we flipped on the James Webb, by the way, the James Webb does do secret missions for NASA and for the government. The James Webb is an international telescope, but it is most certainly used for top secret missions as well. I guarantee it. I can guarantee it. Same as the Hubble was. And what if they see something in the distance that's coming, and we've been warned either some way, by some means, that they're not here to kill us, or maybe they lost their home and they're looking for refugee. They're looking for a home planet. Who knows what the deal might be? But I think they know something's on its way, and it just like we would track a meteor or a comet. They've tracked this, and they've put a date on it, and they've been given some sort of warning. That's my idea.
But that begs the question too. It's like, why keep this from the general public?
Because they wanted to wait until the 11th hour, much like humans do with school. We procrastinate. So we waited till the 11th hour, and then we're like, fuck, now it's, I guess, cat's out
maybe
of the
they
bag.
thought it could go away too. Maybe they waited as long as they could just to see if they could tuck it under the covers, and then it got to the point
not only
where they
that,
were like,
though,
we can't.
But the ramifications that it would have on certain individuals when it comes to religion, to say that there is life outside this planet, and it lives, this is the areas that they live in, or interdimensional, what have you, that is going to rock the foundation of what a lot of people hold dear and what holds them together. And I think that's something that they've been scared to bring up. Linda Moulton Howe brought that up when she was talking to Ty, that religion is a huge factor in total disclosure.
Big time. This is what my next YouTube video is going to be about too. I'm going to be covering some potentials as far as what would actually flip society upside down. It's not just black and white, like, oh, we tell the citizens of Earth that there's, non-human intelligence visiting us, and then there's the result. Like, I really think there's a lot more to this, and I think there's a lot more specifics involved with this that I'm going to go into. Like, here, I'll give you a really good example. What if you and Ty both found out that everything that happens here on Earth stays here, meaning that no matter what you do, no matter how you act, your behavior, the crimes you commit, anything good, bad, goofy, otherwise, it doesn't matter because biologically speaking, that when your physical body dies, your consciousness moves on to like let's just say another state of energy, whatever you would like to call it. Um, that the idea that your actions here may not necessarily affect anything except for here.
You might be here to learn a lesson,
right? But it's like that means that me, you, Hitler, Gandhi, Stalin, Mother Teresa, everyone's going to the same place. Everybody. There's no heaven, there's no hell. It's just the next step. That would create some issues, big time. Like, because then people would look at life here and be like, so you mean to tell me that it just doesn't matter? Like, it's not.
But I don't think it's
not pointless that there's nothing.
Simple.
But I don't.
But there's things to learn.
I don't believe that
in this physical
yes,
form.
I think
there's lessons to learn.
Likely to believe that.
I think, and reincarnation was even taken out of the Bible, right? Because
100%.
It didn't fit their narrative. But what if we are here to learn a lesson? We're here to, suffer, right? People ask, why would God let us suffer? Well, what if God doesn't necessarily exist in, the robe, and
right.
God is the process of evolution. God is what allows plants to breathe and for us to breathe. The God particle, essentially, right? What if God is in all of us, just like we are made up of stardust? What if God is in all of us, and it all has to do with being self-aware and conscious, right?
Self-actualization and introspective.
So the ether, right? The ether that Linda Moulton talks about, that is the God. That's God. And we are here to learn what it's like to be flesh and bone, to have restrictions, to suffer, to be happy, to feel what it's like to love, to be heartbroken. And then we move on to the next stage. And if you didn't learn the lessons that you needed to, then you're reincarnated, and that's why deja vu happens, because you're not reincarnated. A turtle will not reincarnate as a human, but that's why a sea turtle, knows exactly to go to the ocean once it's born. These are instincts. These are, deja vu and instincts, I think, are glitches in the system.
Right. Ty, you should really read the Tibetan Book of the Dead. My dad read it when he was just out of high school, and a lot of what you're talking about, I think, would resonate with you if you went.
So instinct and deja vu have a lot to do with, I think, slips in. So deja vu, not everybody has, right? Not everybody gets deja vu. A lot of people do, but so
I get it a lot.
So what if that is not necessarily that you've been in a similar predicament in this life, but in a different one, and you're
there's familiarity that your soul remembers.
Yeah, that you're trying to put it together. Maybe that's why we're we're a species that, because we're so conscious, the higher in development you get, like horses are born and they're able to walk within, an hour
minutes,
or two.
Yeah.
And, and humans, we're helpless until we're like 5-6 years old, and even then
I know some people were helpless until they were 20.
Yeah. So
well, at the same time, we're a more complex species than they are.
That's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at. So the further along you get in the evolutionary process, that God process, right? That process of evolution that God creates, that process is magical, right? For us to be able to, to have gone from amoebas who crawled out of the ocean and sprouted legs because they needed ways to maneuver this new environment. You know, it's all, so the higher you get on the conscious or the scale of consciousness, the harder it is. So that's why we don't remember a lot of our. That's why we're essentially. When's the first memory you have? Probably when you were 4 or 5 years old. Right?
Yeah, right. 3 years old.
Yeah, horses, other animals are able to learn instantly, and that's because they're not on the level that we are. We need to have our memory wiped if we're reincarnated, right? And there are these people who remember past lives. Leslie Keene's fantastic documentary about surviving death. I'm not a huge fan of Leslie Keene. I'm not, but I love that series on Netflix. I recommend it to everybody.
Let me ask you this.
It's amazing
because there is the flip side of this, and I think that is the more catastrophic, more serious look at it. Not to disregard anything you just said, because I think what you just said was brilliant. But what I'm saying is, imagine the flip side of that. If you take everything that we've seen and you kind of portray it in just hard fact, let's say that these extraterrestrials have traveled here from a far distance. They've set up bases on the backside of the moon because, well, why wouldn't you? Another species has set up bases under the water because, well, why wouldn't you? If
I was going to hide in plain sight, right?
Right, exactly. And all of this is a means of studying and understanding what happens to our civilization. All of this could be that these extraterrestrials, one of them, if not a joint number of them, like Linda Moulton Howe said, altered our genetics to help create Homo sapien. Okay.
Right.
But then when you die, that's it. You're done. There's just, when you die, your neurons are not firing, your blood is not running, you mentally and physically die. Okay. Now, am I saying that's the truth? What I'm saying is, if that is what we are told, if that is what we are to learn from the existence of extraterrestrials,
that would suck.
That there is that all they know is that when you die, you die. Then how would that affect, knowing that, I think would rock our civilization.
No, I think it would
heavily dependent.
No, that is a good point.
On religion.
It would ruin my life.
I think it would ruin our lives.
Now,
it would ruin
the
my
only
life,
way
personally.
I see that outcome has a silver lining is that if people begin to understand that our lives are so valuable in this universe, and for us to waste it arguing with each other on Twitter, sitting around the couch watching endless mindless TV and not really accomplishing anything as a civilization, I think that is something that could wake up a civilization to understand that, hey, we need to cherish this time that I'm alive. Because
what if they lie to us about it too? What if you know what I mean? Like, what if they take what you're saying, but it's not true, and then they just
exactly
tell us
right?
Like that's
even more twisted. Now, like what Linda Moulton Howe was saying, that is beautiful, and I was just like, man, I would love for that to be the exact outcome that happens to every single individual.
Right.
We lost sight.
I hope
and so I'm not trying to drag everything down, but what I'm saying is that if that were a reality that the government has been trying to keep from the public, it would be something that would have to be catastrophic enough to where they would lose control of society, which is why they would say, we cannot let them know. We cannot let them know that what happened at Roswell was an actual flying saucer that got hit by lightning and crashed with bodies bodies that being present. You know,
I
how
think
do
there's a
we
lot
keep
of
that?
different there's a lot of different scenarios, which is why I want to do the video about this. There's a lot of different scenarios that I can see that would
Right.
really, really upset the status quo and like the general standard rhythm of life on Earth. Like the simple notion that we were created by those beings, like if that becomes fact, that
Mhm.
opens up a doorway to a million questions that um evangelicals and maybe very, very devout Muslims and devout Buddhists. Like, there's a lot of different faiths that are going to look at these things differently, and some of them are going to have reactions that are visceral in nature, even. But then
Mhm.
you also take into consideration some other scenarios. Like, for instance, what if we found out that we are essentially cattle,
Sorry,
right? Like, no, you're good, man.
internet failure.
It happens. No, I was saying to him, I'm saying, what if we found out that these beings look at us the same way that we look at like cows and chickens? What if they come down and they abduct us for genetic material and like they don't even hold us anywhere near their level? Like to them, we're no different than the chicken in the coop. I think that would really, really, really upset some people as well.
But that's not
to,
something
to
that
Nica-
go ahead.
to Nicatina's earlier point, what I was saying, if we were to find out that when we die, it just the light switch goes out and that's it, it would ruin our civilization.
And that's what I'm saying.
It's like
Sadly
my
enough,
ultimate
yes.
fear.
Exactly.
It would,
Ultimate fear.
dude, we would go into purge mode. Like, well, what the fuck? It doesn't matter anyway. We would party and the ozone layer, the atmosphere.
There's no
Yeah.
telling what would happen, and it's
I
just
would
out of
be
control.
so fucking depressed
people,
and scared.
Every billionaire would start buying hookers. Like, dude, the world would
Can't
go
do that
to
anyways.
shit. I'm saying,
But
but we would, but then people like Putin on their deathbed nuke America.
Right, yeah, like something wild. Like, it's like, oh, who cares? Like, just hit the red button.
Well, okay, so here's my question to you guys: is that if
Yeah,
these
go ahead.
extraterrestrials, are here, which I totally believe that they are, but when we talk about the idea that the fact that we have nuclear weapons, right,
Mhm.
and that they're trying to tell us something like, hey, you don't need these things, or you're destroying your planet.
Right.
What is to stop these extraterrestrials from actually just coming out and making a presence known? Like, hey, we're here. This is what you're doing, and it's wrong. What's to stop them from doing that? I mean,
maybe a prime directive of some sort. Maybe they have a limit to how they can interact with us. Like, maybe they can only do it through gestures as opposed to like direct conversation. Maybe that's like how it works, where it's like, or because we speak English, and maybe they have a completely different form of communication, which I believe they do.
mm-hmm.
Then perhaps actions speak louder than words. Maybe that's something they like live by. So instead of coming down and being like, hey, don't do that, that's when they fly over and they flip a switch and they're like, hey, hopefully they'll receive this message as what we're trying to say.
Because there's an aggressive way to get your message across, and then there is a non-aggressive way, which is likely what they have been doing. But at the same time, you have to wonder, have they been here? I mean, Linda Moulton Howe said that they had been here for what, 280 million years or something like that. Some long period of time that extraterrestrials are the reason why an asteroid hit the Earth to wipe out the dinosaurs. That this is one big testing ground for all kinds of genetics.
I said that too.
Right.
I've said that multiple
Which is not
times.
out of the realm of possibilities. I mean, even listening to you guys talk about that, I was like, fuck.
Look at how many organisms live on this earth and how many we discover every year. We're always finding new creatures on this planet.
As with Linda, I don't know if you guys noticed, but with Linda, she's just like Dr. Greer, where you could ask one question and then you won't speak again until the hour and a half mark, and that's just to say, all right, guys, thank you for watching this video. Like, share, subscribe. Like she can run a conversation.
Yeah. When she was going, she was going to go. She was going to go. Like Ty would try to jump in, and she'd be like, "Hold on."
Yeah.
In my head, I was like,
I think she's passionate, man.
Yeah, I was like, stand back. She's going 100 miles an hour right now. Just get off the tracks.
She has a lot of interesting things to say, and I always say this about Linda. Her work early on cattle mutilation is unmatched in that subject. Like, honestly, she literally did such a good job with that.
People forget she was a Peabody winning investigative reporter.
Yeah, she's got credentials.
And she was making medical documentaries for Stanford University.
Exactly.
Like, she comes from a medical background, and then she did investigative reporting and combined the two, and then came across this cattle mutilation thing that, ultimately she came to the conclusion that via testimony and basically a lack thereof evidence in that case, because a lack of blood, a lack of this organ, a lack of that organ in these 1,700. I mean, guys, these animals, these full-grown steer weigh 17 to 2,000 pounds. That's the same weight as like a compact vehicle, right? You would need a crane to lift one of these things, right? You cannot just you can't just pick one up and move it around. These things, there was no tracks coming in. There was, much of the time they'd be laying in dirt or grass. Not a speck of blood could be found anywhere around the animal or inside the animal.
That's impossible.
Inside.
You realize that.
Not in the veins, and then
blood stains.
The part of there's this thing that covers human hearts, the
I know what you're talking about.
Pericardium,
something like that. Yeah,
it's a thin white tissue that surrounds our hearts, and it also happens to surround like primates' hearts, and then also cows.
Yes.
There was one case where they were on scene of a cattle mutilation, and so when you give an animal an autopsy, it's called a necropsy. Not an autopsy, but a necropsy. Yep. So a veterinarian with necropsy skills, or that's their trade, it specifically comes out. And sometimes they'll do it right on the spot. And in most of these cattle mutilations, they wanted it done on the spot because you didn't want to move the animal or anything like that. You want it to be exactly the way it was laid out. And oftentimes, these things where the organs were removed with precision, surgical precision. The eye that was facing the sky would be removed. These things, there'd be no blood and inside or outside of. And then this one case where there's the necropsy officiator holds out and says, "Sheriff, this is the pericardium of the cow." And the sheriff says, "Yeah, so?" And he said, "Well, the heart's missing. How is the pericardium?"
That is so weird.
How is the pericardium untouched, but the heart missing?
That's so strange.
It would be like, and I related it to pulling your finger bone out without ripping the skin.
That's bizarre.
That it doesn't make sense.
But to one part, to the heart only, not like the entire body, not the entire leg or its head, but in that one part. And back in the day, settlers and all that, hunters, they would eat, and they would eat the liver, the heart, the vital organs, because they carried more nutrients. And so, just the idea running through my mind, and I'd messaged Ty about this, it wouldn't surprise me if these extraterrestrials, that in order for them to survive, they eat these vital organs, or they process them somehow because that gives them the most nutrients that they need to keep going.
That would bother some people.
Well, would it?
And there's no blood. There's no blood.
Yeah, it would.
No. Would it? Because
if it came from humans, yes.
Yeah.
No, yeah. If it came from humans,
That's my heart.
To be more specific, it's like, hey, we have heart eaters around.
Yeah, you're taking my heart. I can't let you do that.
But if they're doing it to animals, but they're abducting humans as well, yeah, that will cause a line. But if they make it a clear indicator that they abduct animals for for sustenance, and
different.
then humans for experimentation, but they never eat them and they always bring them back, I think that would be a whole different story. I think humankind would demand that the abduction stop.
Yes, easily. Yeah, it
violates
our sanctity.
But the animal abductions, they would say, do your thing.
And this is where these treaties come into play. I'm sure you know about that, but when Grush was talking to Russ Coulthard with News Nation, he said he was of the belief, based on the information that he had collected, that there are treaties in place between factions of human beings and non-human intelligence. And so there's two ideas here, right? This idea of there's like a timeline, there's a crunch for time. Perhaps that timeline to disclose was made by these beings. They gave us the timeline in one of these treaties decades ago, and now we're pressed for time because they waited until the 11th hour. But not only that, but the abductions may have very well been in the treaties. I've heard for years, and I never believed it. But once Grush said what he said, that's when I was like, okay, wait a second. Now I really have to look at this. In the treaties, it was apparently a trade between a faction of human beings and non-human intelligence, where it's like, okay, you can conduct experiments, abduct human beings, but you have to return them. And then in exchange for that, we receive, technology from you. But apparently what happened is that there were some things that they weren't supposed to do that they just did. And it's because they don't look at treaties like we do. It's like they violated a certain stipulation of the treaty because they had to, and they don't understand the concept of like permission or anything. Right. It's like they just did it and they're like, what's wrong? And they're like, that's not how we do things here on Earth.
Yeah.
It's a weird aspect of it. Again, we're talking about, I've even heard the theory that, back when Eisenhower was in office, that they came to a conclusion that, you can abduct X number amount of people as long as you give us technology to study, right? And you got to make sure you put them back, right? Now, who's to say that they're going to follow by those rules 100%? Who's going to say that the craft that are flying over the Atlantic, flying through our airspace, dropping from 30,000 feet with no one there to stop them, no one there to tell them, hey, you can't be here. And if they do, how are they going to stop that? They can't.
They can't.
They're flying freely through our airspace, unmatched,
total impunity.
And that was the message that, that Ryan Graves was trying to put out there, was that like they are just doing this, and we are helpless to stop them.
And it's a danger in certain instances.
But if we were a danger, if these beings were a danger to us, we would have been in trouble already.
It's been long enough.
But I mean, like accidental, like aircraft incidents specifically, but not like them purposefully coming after us.
There's been at least 18 documented near misses, at least 18. And near misses, for people who don't understand, so if you come within 50 miles of 50 miles of a military craft, that is considered, close enough to be a threat.
Yeah, because of the rate of speed, how long it would take for them to get from 50 miles to the close-in.
It's the closure rate.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it sounds like it's far away, which it is, I guess, like if you're on foot, but in the air, that is going to close in seconds.
Yeah, in my documentary, I have a whole section. I have a friend who's a pilot, and he's going to take me up in his plane, and show me how fast closure rate can be, how like what the precautions are if you were
scary.
Yeah, what the precautions are if you were to see anything.
Okay.
And he's gonna explain all that to me while
That's
we're in the
good.
air.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah. So, well, that's gonna be in the documentary that I start shooting next summer. So
I'm so happy you're going up and in that plane and not me. I can't lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, I'm terrified of flying, man.
Yeah, we'll be doing some maneuvers that are pretty wild.
Oh God.
So when you connect, and that sounds pretty crazy, by the way.
Fuck, man.
When you connect all these dots, right? When you listen to the testimony of Commander Fravor and the Tic Tac, right? When he says, I'm going to go check it out, and he flies towards it. That's what everybody has ever wanted anyone to do in that situation. Just go towards it and see what it does, right?
Yeah,
awesome.
Of course.
When you hear his testimony, you listen to Ryan Graves' testimony, David Grush, right? When you look at the other stories that are out there, the Shag Harbor incident, one of the things they said,
the Canadian Roswell.
One of the things that they said was that there was this yellow foam floating on the water.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when you look at the color of sulfur, it's yellow.
Oh boy, that's a great connection.
So
wow.
If anything were to crash there that had that in it, it could have easily created, similar to what we heard about in Moment of Contact, the vapor that was leaking out. Who knows if that's what it materialized into as it reached the top of the water.
Wow.
So I do want to say this because I do have to leave in a moment.
Right. We're about to wrap things up anyway, so it's fine.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'll stay to the end if you're going to wrap up in a minute, but I do want to say this. So I sent Tom today. Next week we're going to be having Ella LeBain on the show. But aside from that, we're going to be having Philip Mantle, and the author of this new book that's coming out, and it expands the evidence on the Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson abduction. So it's often referred to as the Pascagoula abduction. This is one of the most credible abduction stories there is.
Absolutely.
And now we have more corroborating evidence. Tom and I were lucky enough to get advanced copies of the book. So we're working on that. And in regards to discussing that information, next month when we do the show, because I think you said you want to do this, once a month?
Yeah, I mean, once. And realistically, you were here last month anyway, so yeah, once a month we'll get together and have these kind of conversations because there's so much to talk about, so much.
Oh yeah,
dude, we could have a total crossover between this and pop culture. We could talk about first contact films. There's a lot to go over. I really enjoy science fiction. Like, I'm sure
you can be our tie back into the pop culture world where we maybe we'll team up and do some like movie reviews like Arrival, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Maybe we can do a watch party. Do they still allow you to do watch parties on Twitch?
As long as it's not Warner Brothers. Anytime I did it with the Warner Brothers film, they would hit me with a copyright strike.
Of course, Close Encounters is a Warner Brothers.
We can always try.
The best one is Warner Brothers. No, Ty and I were just on somebody else's pop culture show.
He knows who Film Junkie is.
I was just gonna say, if we could get him, you, me, and Ty, I feel like that would be such a killer discussion. Honestly,
yeah, definitely.
Because you guys both
multicasted.
You guys know your stuff, man. You really know your stuff on this subject. I was actually really impressed. I didn't know how much you actually knew.
This is
Tom before the show was asking me. He's like, "Oh, let's educate them." Well, I said it. I said, "Let's educate some motherfuckers," and he said something, and I was like, "But by the way, like, Nickatina knows a lot. He's well versed in this subject."
Well, I always tell people that my biggest passions in life is, comic book movies, pop culture, UFO, government conspiracies, but number one above all that is food. So that's always going to be my passion is food, which is why I made double-decker tacos before the show, and they were great.
Yeah, buddy.
But like I said, when you connect all these dots, when you connect all these stories, encounters, testimonials, it all starts to make sense, and it all starts to kind of paint a picture of what kind of world we're really living in here. What is that?
It's magical. It's very magical.
Those are my timestamps.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I'm recording this.
Yes.
So I think it's really cool how they allow the multicast.
Yeah, it's a new thing now, and I was like, God, where has that been?
It's so great.
Yeah.
I'm live on my channel right now. I got like my diehards over there watching.
Yeah, no, it's really awesome.
Great.
And on my end, it shows you who's linked, like which users are linked from a different channel. So it's really awesome that they allowed that. And on top of that, it allows you to talk in the chat if you're a guest. In the past, you couldn't do that. You'd have to bring up YouTube and like do it on there, So it's really cool, some of the innovations they've had. So, but guys, we are at the end of our time here. I want to thank Tom and Ty for coming on here again, educating us about what's really happening in this world. The UFO hearings, they were, as some might say, that, we really didn't learn anything new that we didn't hear before. But what you're overlooking is these individuals were sworn in under oath and still gave the exact testimonies that they gave before. And the other thing that I think goes unnoticed is that every question that was thrown their way, they had an immediate answer for. There was never a moment where they were like, I don't really know how to answer that.
Absolutely agree.
There was an answer for everything they had to say. And that to me was like, that's credence enough that should tell you that what they're saying is 100% authentic and is the truth. And this is a real thing.
And if you want to watch the hearings, if you go to Total Disclosure, our YouTube channel, we streamed the hearings like a watch party because we can do that because it's government, so it's taxpayer. Like there's no law against, there's no fair use in that. It's like we pay for it, so it's open to the public, so you can stream it on your channel as long as you're doing commentary. So if you're gonna go watch the hearings, now that you've we've potentially piqued your interest, watch them over on Total Disclosure, because you'll get me, Tom, and Digby discussing it. And totaldisclosure.org is where you can find our all of our platforms. And then Spotify for video podcast. Next week, Ella LeBain and Tom can be found on where?
YouTube at Cortex0, and then on Twitter, Cortex_0.
Yeah.
And there you go. So guys, if you're listening on Spotify, make sure you follow me on Spotify. Follow Total Disclosure on Spotify as well. They have a ton of awesome content. If you become a member of their channel, you get access to more content than just being just a regular follower as well. Check them out on YouTube, Cortex0. That was in your channel, right? Cortex0?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah. You're like, no, it's not. Oh, God. Yeah, so check out Cortex0 on YouTube. It's got some amazing content on there as well. And like I said, guys, if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to us on YouTube. Smash the like button. Leave a comment in the comment section below. Hit the bell notification button so you're always notified of any new content. Join us on Patreon. Become a member. And Ty, you have one more thing to say?
No. I was just pointing up because at this time, you might have the subscribe thing there. And the video you may want to watch next.
There you go. And with that being said, you guys, we will see you guys next time. I'll be live tomorrow. Go ahead.
Let's keep exploring the unknown together.
We will. And definitely. You don't have to worry about that. And guys, I'll be live again tomorrow morning for the Nickatina Show. We'll be going over our Monday roundup of all the newest pop culture news and a whole lot more. So guys, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Ty, for coming on the show. And for everybody else who was here, thank you as well. And we'll see you guys next time.